right, we got a lot of folks still joining, so I'll give it a minute more and we'll kick off the meeting soon.
Great. I see some familiar faces or some familiar names and some new folks, so that's exciting.
All right, I think we are getting towards critical mass, so I'll kick us off here. Good evening and welcome everyone. Bienvenidos a todos. Thank you for taking the time to be here this evening. We're glad that you're here. We look forward to hearing from you and receiving your feedback. Before we go any further, I wanted to introduce Crystal so that people who are more comfortable in their first language have access to a Spanish translation of this meeting. Crystal.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to give an introduction in English and then I'll do it in Spanish to get everyone on board. Okay, so hi, my name is Crystal Mauricio. I'm from the Community Language Co-op and I'll be your interpreter for today. Today we'll be practicing language justice, which means that everybody gets the opportunity to listen or speak in the language that they feel most comfortable with. Whenever interpretation gets activated, you'll go to the bottom of the Zoom screen and you'll click a globe icon and that turns on interpretation. Make sure that even if you don't need Spanish interpretation, you select English. And also just keep in mind to mind how fast you're speaking, just because Spanish takes about 20% longer to convey the same message. Thank you. Hola a todos, mi nombre es Cristal Mauricio y vengo parte del Community Language Co-op y seré su intérprete de hoy. Hoy vamos a practicar la justicia del lenguaje para que todos tengan la oportunidad de hablar y escuchar en el lenguaje que se sientan más cómodos. Cuando se active la interpretación, van a ir al botón con una esfera de interpretación abajo de la pantalla de Zoom y no sé, si no lo encuentran, hay un botón donde dice más y ahí debe ser una de las opciones. Escojan su lenguaje y también por favor de cuidar el paso en que hablen para que pueda interpretar con eficaz. Gracias.
Thank you, Crystal. We have a whole team of people who are here this evening to share information and to hear your feedback. In the interest of time, we'll ask the presenters to introduce themselves as they speak. Everyone on the team will put their introductory information into the chat. You've maybe seen that already. We will ask for our presenters to have their camera on when they're speaking so everyone can see them at the top of the screen, and camera off when you're not speaking. Giving Crystal a moment to be able to do the translation. And I also wanted to give Councilman Watson a brief moment to say hello.
Buenas noches. Me llamo Daryl Watson, consulador de Distrito 9. Good evening, everyone. My name is Daryl Watson. I'm the city council member for District 9. I want to thank you all for taking the time to come out tonight to share and engage in a very important dialogue. I'd like to thank our friends at the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, our friends at the Regional Transportation District, and the facilitators, the professional facilitators at Livable Cities for making sure that we have an engaged dialogue and that each of your voices are heard. This is one of many opportunities we'll provide for a community to provide feedback. And with that, I'll turn it back over to David and the rest of the team. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you,
And David,
Councilman.
I'm going to jump in for a split second here. I just want to make sure our team's activated translation. I think Crystal is waiting for that to be activated. Oh, and it looks like it's being worked on. Okay, cool. I will let that play out, but wanted to make sure we were on it.
Thank you, Maggie. And again, I'm David Krutzinger. I'm the Transit Director representing the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. For today, we'll do a little more overview of what we'll cover in the meeting, and then we'll describe various ways for you to provide feedback. We'll seek feedback on our 4 priority topics identified by all of the previous work and by community members such as yourselves. Topic number 1 will be public transit. Topic number 2 will be transportation safety. Topic number 3 will be the public realm, which is a different way of saying landscaping and sidewalks and all the things that are between the building and the street. And then 4, cultural and economic vitality of the corridor. We will have time for open questions and answers towards the end of the meeting. And then at the very end of the meeting, we will talk about what you can expect next. I'm going to turn it over to Meredith to talk about uh, how you will be able to provide feedback several different ways. Thanks,
Great. Thanks,
Meredith.
David. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Meredith Vinskowski with Livable Cities Studio. We are the consultant team supporting the city on this. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how to engage tonight. And then I'll be going through, as we go through the meeting, we'll go through a bunch of questions. So a few things tonight. The meeting will be recorded so that it can be made available after the presentation, just so you know that. And then we have a couple features for those that haven't used Zoom before. The chat feature is on tonight, as well as the Q&A. The chat feature should be used for, as we're going through questions tonight, we're going to be doing a bunch of them. If you want to just share general feedback as we're going, please feel free to put additional chat, thoughts in chat. We'll be doing our best to keep track of that and share out some of that information, but you all should be able to see that as well, because everyone's sending some information to everyone as we're through their introductions. And then for the Q&A feature, if you have specific questions that you want us to address at the end of the meeting, we have some time set aside for that. Please put them in the Q&A. We will be holding all those questions until the end, and we'll do our best to get through as many of those as we can. We'll be following up after the meeting for those with answers to the questions we can't get to. And as people are putting questions in the Q&A, you can use the little feature to the little thumbs up. If you select that, you can upvote it. And that just tells us that a lot of people have that same question, and we'll do our best to get to that as when we get to that Q&A section at the end of the meeting. So please use those tools tonight as we go through the meeting. And then if you want to go to the next slide, Chelsea, the other thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing mentee polling tonight. So we have a lot of questions for you. It's intended to be a very interactive meeting. Mentee polling, I want to take a minute to explain to you all how we do this if you haven't done it. I imagine some of you have joined through a computer, some of you are on a cell phone, and you can do it both ways. As we go through the questions, there will be a QR code that pops up, and you can scan that and get into the polling that way. Or you can type in menti.com and enter the code that will be shown on the screen. This will pop up in just a minute for the question. And then it's just a kind of live updates, and you submit answers to the questions. And then you'll see the results live. So you'll hear what everyone who's on the meeting tonight as they're responding. You'll be able to see immediate responses, which will be fun to kind of see how. Right now I'm seeing 96 attendees. So all of you, how you're responding collectively. So, we're taking the collective feedback. It gives us really good information on, what the thoughts are for the questions we're asking. So just last note, if you're on your phone, I think you just have to open up the browser, and you can have Zoom open and a browser open, obviously, and do your mentee polling through that browser, but it'll pop up through the Zoom webinar. If you have questions, maybe feel free to dump them in chat. I think it's pretty easy, and we're actually going to start by testing it now. I believe this next slide is a mentee question. So this is kind of a warm up, and you all can, again, so you can see the QR code, take it through that, or feel free to just go to menti.com and put the number in. So in 2040, we'd love to hear, what would you love Welton Street to be? What are the words that come to mind for you when you think about the future of Welton? And you are seeing them live populate on the screen here. So it looks like about 57 or so are in the mentee. Like we'll give this a little bit extra time because it looks like people are getting into mentee as we go and adding answers. So vibrant, car-free, transit-rich.
I also see we're getting a couple questions in the Q&A already, so excellent. So reminder, let's use the chat for things like housekeeping, like, hey, I can't hear somebody, or I'm having technical problems. We've got great questions coming into the chat, and just as a heads up, we know we won't be able to get to everyone's questions. We're going to try to make sure we answer project-specific questions this evening, but we will be downloading those questions after the fact and providing a document to everyone with answers to those questions. So if you put a question in the chat tonight and it doesn't get answered live, know that we'll follow up with you for an answer on that one.
Great, so many answers coming in. I'm seeing plenty of parking, clean, human scaled. We'll talk about a lot of these things as we go through the meeting tonight. Shaded, wide sidewalks. All right, we'll just give this another minute to make sure everyone's getting into Minty and getting familiar with it. Okay, looks like everyone's gotten in just about that wants to get in. Okay, lots of good thoughts and ideas there. Again, I think we'll be talking about much of this tonight. Bustling, historic preservation, lively gathering space, all great answers. So many of the words are getting smaller as we go. All right. We are going to keep moving. Thank you all for doing the little warm up with us, and we'll keep moving.
Thank you. Again, David Kretzinger. I'll finish a couple of introductory remarks, and then we'll jump into the priority areas of discussion. So when we talk about Welton and Downing, we're in a space where Denver and RTD are making decisions in a collaborative way. Denver's responsible for the public right-of-way. You can think of right-of-way as the street. We also control the sidewalks, traffic lanes and signals, on-street bike parking, bike facilities, design standards, land use. We do the zoning and all the building permits, and we are funded by various local, federal, and state grants and funding sources. RTD is the public transit service provider operating in the right-of-way, controlling service schedules, routing. They own the buses and trains. They own the stations and the platforms and other components of communication and some of the signal things that are attached to the regular traffic signals. They're funded by a variety of sources too. So when we think about making improvements to the corridor, filling your 2040 visions, it's a collaborative conversation between these two entities to make those things happen. On our next slide, the purpose of this project is to partner with you all as the community to define a clear vision for the future of transit on Welton and Downing and develop feasible recommendations to achieve the vision, to align it with the intention of the planned Central Rail extension on Downing. Our study area, as you can see, includes both of those components, and we are using money from the Federal Transit Authority to be able to complete this work. Next, I'll turn it over to Chris Quinn to talk about many of the studies that have brought us to this point. Chris?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Chris Quinn. I am a planner with RTD, and the purpose of this slide is just to provide a little bit of background on how we got to where we are and what some of the previous plans were for the corridor. Starting way back in 2004, voters of the RTD district approved the Fast Tracks plan. And one of the components of the Fast Tracks plan was to, as we've been talking about, extending the light rail from its current terminus at 30th and Downing and connect to 38th and Blake. Subsequent to that, and when we were when the plan was being formulated, a study was done, which high level study, which showed that it should be feasible to in fact do that. But in 2011, or let me back up. In 2011, then, just as this is a little bit of a side note to the actual rail planning, the city of Denver did a plan which looked at the conversion of Welton Street from a one-way street to a two-way street and ultimately recommended a two-way conversion for the street. Then in 2014, RTD did what we were calling the Central Rail Extension, CRE, Central Rail Extension Report. And it found that some of the original assumptions that had gone into the Fast Tracks plan for extending the rail from 30th and Downing to 38th and Blake, some of those assumptions might not be feasible. It identified a lot of operational issues with extending the rail and kind of came to the conclusion, which everybody always loves, that is that additional study would be needed to figure out how, in fact, we could make that connection work. Now, in 2019, and then again in 2025, RTD did an assessment of the unfinished corridors of the Fast Tracks plan, the Welton, or the connection to from 30th and Downing to 38th and Blake, being one of the primary corridors that RTD has not been able to complete. We did an update not on the feasibility, but just on what the funding would look like. We came up with some new cost estimates. We did that in both 2019 and then again about a year ago in 2025 as part of our finishing Fast Tracks report. So now here we are many years later from the Fast Tracks plan, working together with, as David noted, the RTD and the city are working together to determine what should the Welton Street corridor ultimately look like. So thank you.
So our overall approach to this effort with you all is first to collaborate with you to identify vision and goals as well as challenges and constraints, and I'll explain that a little bit more on another slide. Step 2 will be to really analyze options and better understand opportunities and trade-offs. And then the third step will be to document near-term and long-term recommendations to achieve this vision and start working on funding for the implementation of the recommendations. So we're just in box number 1 tonight, starting to work with you. We'll go on to the next slide. So as I said, we're going to spend a lot of time with you all as the public and community to make sure we hear your opinions. We're going to update existing conditions. There's a lot of past work we're going to rely on, but a lot has changed since the pandemic, and a lot of things have been built since many of the studies that Chris was just talking about were completed. We'll look at options in the corridor and evaluate how well they meet all of your all's input in terms of what we're trying to achieve. We'll assess the key trade-offs with you and recommend a preferred alternative. And as I said, we'll work towards a strategic implementation plan. Our work over the next 12 to 18 months will not get to final engineering. We won't start construction, but we will commit to working towards implementation. We won't be able to do things the day after we finish this study, but we will be able to implement. And the next slide has a little bit of an overview of what that might look like. So big picture from start to finish, full implementation of very big ideas may take as much as 10 years. But I don't want folks to be discouraged by that. We will be working with you all through summer of 2027. So again, we're here at the very beginning on the left, spring 2026, vision and goals development. I mentioned existing conditions. Really, that's diagnosing the problems as we see them today. We do need to reach a go, no go decision on keeping light rail as it is or not by this fall and provide that information back to RTD. And then we will work together to further refine and determine a preferred course of action into next spring, and then further keep working on that to get to design and implementation by summer next year. All the steps beyond that are future efforts. Thank you. Next slide. Past community input from previous plans and from the council meeting, from the meeting hosted by the council office on November 5th last year. And we'll talk more about this, is to improve transit service, the frequency, reliability, and connections that you can make from the community, support a high quality pedestrian environment. There's been comments in the chat about sidewalk, interest in maintaining Welton's cultural identity, and maintaining business vitality. At the same time, there are interests in making improvements, and so we also need to talk about how construction for those improvements would occur and what the impacts during construction might look like. The things that we know that have not been answered, and that's what's in the bottom labeled as gaps, is that we know there are more wants and needs than will likely fit in the space that we have between the buildings. And so we'll have to work with you all on trade-offs and make sure we get the most of the things that are important to you. And then, as I mentioned, to make any change, we have to do some construction. And so we'll have to work with you all to talk about what construction timelines might look like and what temporary measures might be needed, parking removal or temporary parking closure to create space for those improvements. Thank you.
Great, thanks, David. So we've got another question for you all through Menti. You can, if you closed it, open it back up and do the same thing, or just go to the browser that you had it open. So we'd love to hear from you all what elements of Welton Street must not be lost. So, you know, a few examples: cultural identity, history, affordability. Obviously, people are putting lots of responses up. So we're seeing a little bit around light rail. We're trying to make this more visible to everybody. So just give it a second as we're sorting the answers. But you should be able to still use it and put your answers in. All right, so a lot about light rail. We'll talk about that. Black-owned businesses, transit, cultural identity, business district, history, trees. Okay, this is great because we're going to be talking. We have some more specific questions for you all tonight. We'll kind of tease out some trade-offs and just understand kind of your perspective on things. Walkability, parking. Yes, it is easy to walk. Small businesses. Culture, healthy retail. Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Vibrancy. That's always a good word. Okay, we'll keep going and we'll get into the priorities, I believe. And so we're going to go through each of these. And I think I'm turning it back to David, right? Or Maggie?
I think I'm first with public transit. And I think we have, let's see. So for public transit, as noted earlier, that I mentioned through previous work and community advisory group input, our key themes for public transportation are: one, fulfilling a connection to the A line; two, improving reliability. Reliability means you don't have any unexpected stops, say at a stoplight if you're on a train or a bus. And if a trip takes 10 minutes under the best conditions, it's always 10 minutes. It's not 20 minutes. Sometimes it's not, it's something that you can count on. Number three, transit facilities are sufficient to attract people to use the service. You can see where to get on and you are comfortable getting on at that place. And number four, reducing the number of transfers needed to get to a destination. Zero transfers is best, but if two intersecting services are really frequent, then a transfer might not be a problem. People experience this here in Denver. If you go down and are transferring to the 16th Street Mall ride, that runs every 3 minutes, so you hardly think about it. But if your transfer is with a bus that only runs once every 30 minutes or every 60 minutes, and you miss that connection, it's a big impact to your life. So that's my quick introduction for the public transit section. I think we might have a couple of slides more on Menti and what we mean when we say streetscape. Thank you.
Hey, yeah, I'll jump in, guys, here and just talk about some of the types of Menti questions. We're going to be going through a few more here, so just wanted to give you guys some examples of how they're going to work. On sliding scale, it's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to show us where on that scale between two items you feel like you fall. Ranking, you're going to rank things according to your interest, and then multiple choice, just right back to those Scantron days when we were kids. A, B, C, D, or E. Let us know what you think. All right. So one thing I wanted to bring up before we talked about some different parts of the street were a few bits of terminology that we use when we're talking about a streetscape here. So what I have drawn out here for you is a streetscape. And we're going to talk about a few different portions of that. We're going to talk about travel lanes. We're going to talk about where that rail lives. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what we call the public realm. And when we talk about the public realm, the primary items that we're talking about are going to be that pedestrian zone that you see there. And in some ways, we refer to that as the parking lane. Currently, there's a parking lane on most of Welton Street, but one of the things I'd like to have us start to refer to that as is that curbside area. It can be used for a number of things outside of parking, things like pick up and drop off for folks who are using rideshare. It could be used for potential event space or things like that in the future. So just talking about how we want to utilize that parking lane for loading zones, etc. But we may refer back to this in a little bit, but wanted everyone to kind of see this is our current streetscape, and really our confines are building to building. In this area, we have I think primarily a zero setback in this area. So folks are building buildings right up to that public realm, right up to the right of way. And then Dottie has the ability to work with RTD to reconfigure what's in there. And one of the things we're going to talk about at some point are some trade-offs, right? We all wish we could have all of these things, but there's only so many feet and inches in this area. And so at some point in time, we're going to be asking the community, which of these two things is more important for us to utilize this space for?
All right. So now we're jumping into the public transit section. David gave his intro just a minute ago, and so now we're going to actually jump into some Menti questions. Before I go through the Menti questions, I just want to remind everyone there's some information about interpretation that went in chat. So if you were looking for that and you couldn't find the button, it's working now, and the information's in chat. So feel free to send us a message if needed. Okay, so we have a handful of specific transit questions for you all. So what we want to do, this first one is rank the following public transit improvements in order of priority. So the first one being better connections, or I guess it might move around because people are responding, but one is better connections. That could be to downtown, the A line, Union Station, just better connections more broadly. More frequent service. So what we're saying is really at least every 15 minutes. Better reliability, meaning it's always running, it's always on time, and the time is reliable. And then also better designs of the stations. So maybe easier boarding, there's better signage, updated amenities. While all of these things are important, we want to know what is, what order of priority they're kind of the level of importance to you. So obviously you're seeing them live update. People are sharing that the better connections is what's the most important, or should be the priority. We'll give this a few minutes while everyone is working on their responses. I see the question in chat about L-line is every 15 minutes. So does more frequent mean more often than that? I think we're saying just at least every 15 minutes. It could be, but it's at least every 15 minutes. It's not more than that. For consistency, we'll go with that. There's a question about would better design allow for mixed use light rail station areas, meaning parking on both sides between the stations? I'm not sure. I think that really what this is getting at is we've heard a bit about just, wayfinding, knowing where to wait, and just having good signage, amenities, things like level boarding or just easier boarding, some of those things. We don't know, all the details, but I think in general, better design of those stations. This is not intended to be overly specific because we just want to know priorities. All right. Well, it looks like most people have responded. So, yeah, you can see better connections definitely coming in as the priority, followed by more frequent service, at least every 15 minutes, reliability, and then last but still a priority, the better designs of the stations. All right, great. Thanks, everyone. So with this question is kind of that sliding scale. So strongly disagree on the left and strongly agree on the right. Tell us kind of your level of support. So the first statement, better public transit is a priority no matter what type of transit is provided. So it could be light rail, it could be bus. The second one is light rail must be preserved and connected to 38th and Blake above all other corridor priorities, no matter how long it takes. And so you're seeing the targets move as people are responding. Kind of the background color indicates where the voting is. But the number is kind of that average. Matt, I see your question or your comment about the second one being two questions. It is, and it is around preserving light rail and connecting it. We've heard that and we wanted to get feedback on that specifically, but you're right. There's two pieces to that. If you have other thoughts or other questions, if you have questions you want to ask us, you want us to answer later, feel free to put them in Q&A, or we are certainly capturing all the comments here in chat if you have something additional to add. All right. Seems like most people have responded. So, like I said, we have heard a lot about the connection to 38th and Blake being really important, which is why we asked this question this way. If you have some different thoughts, though, please, if it's only one that's really important to you, please put that in chat because we want to make sure we capture that too. And interestingly, they both landed at 3.6. So all right. Thanks, everyone. We have one more question on public transit, then we'll move to the next priority area. So which statement do you most identify with at this time? Light rail should remain on Welton Street. Alternative forms of public transit, such as enhanced bus, should be explored for Welton. Or do you have no preference? So light rail should remain on Welton. Is that kind of blue purple? The dark kind of purplish blue is no preference. And then that kind of coral color being alternative forms of public transit should be explored. So we'll give this a second for the responses to come in. And if you have no preference, but you have other thoughts, feel free to put it in chat. I'm seeing bus does not have to be independent of light rail. Another second or two, but a little heavier weighted towards light rail should remain, but fairly split. Okay, I see the comment around if light rail. Oh, lots of comments coming through. I lost my comment. I wanted to share and make sure it was a good one. If light rail gets extended to 30th, then it should stay. If it doesn't, it should be removed. We wanted to ask this question to understand where, kind of what the thoughts are tonight. There's obviously so much that's going to go into this, and we have quite a few questions, and we kind of collect them all together, and we'll take all this back. So we wanted to just get a sense of where people are tonight, knowing that these are really kind of complex. This is a complex topic, right? There's a lot that goes to it. So thanks for bearing with us as we go through all of our questions. All right, we can keep going. Justin, I believe you're up.
Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. Appreciate everybody's attendance and involvement today. My name is Justin Begley. I'm a Dottie Transportation Planning Supervisor on the team. And I'm going to be just introducing this section of the presentation of the meeting around transportation safety. And so, really trying to be all-encompassing: traffic safety, pedestrian safety, cyclist and scooter safety, rail rider safety. So really, it's the entire spectrum of what happens on our streets is what we're trying to understand more about from the community and their perception. So, through past engagement, we've heard and seen and read in the reports and study that Welton does for folks feel unsafe. And that comes from a few different places. A big one is the fact that there's just at times it's sensed that there's just a lack of activity on the corridor, right? And so now we're kind of venturing maybe a little bit into public safety as well. The lack of, consistent vibrancy and eyes on the street. So there are some dotted areas of the corridor with vacant storefronts, empty parcels, and surface parking lots. So when you just lack that kind of cohesive, always on component to a street, it can start to feel and act a little bit unsafe for folks, both from a perception standpoint and statistically, right? So I think we're trying to solve for all of this as part of whatever comes next. Another key takeaway on the topic of safety is really just focused around traffic safety at this point is just the fact that we've got this two-lane, one-way configuration. Sometimes it acts like a highway, and it's just about moving cars through and out of the area. And that at times has created this highway-like environment. Without, congestion, sometimes we see higher speeds. Higher speeds sometimes lead to slower reaction times. When people on foot or on wheels, personal devices cross paths with others. So, what is the future of Welton going to be with respect to how cars not, necessarily just moving through it to get out to go somewhere else, but potentially slowing, stopping, creating a sense of place and visitation, how can that improve safety? But this is definitely something we've heard from past engagement on the project. So again, staying on the topic of drivers, we've got, drivers crossing Welton. Sometimes they fail to yield to pedestrians, right? Do we have all of the sight lines and everything we need? Are drivers, focusing on approaching traffic from downtown? Um, they're only focused on maybe one direction and not looking both ways, right? And so that potentially has, been uncovered as part of this two-way recommendation in the past, slower, more intentional movement through the corridor can lead to more safe outcomes, and getting people to look both ways, not be distracted so much by what's in their direction of their field of view, but kind of slowing down and taking it all in and operating more safely. And then finally, for anybody who's been on bike, scooter, on foot, any other way traversing the corridor, moving throughout, Welton does have some sections of some pretty narrow sidewalks. Those can feel squeezed between the buildings and the light rail on one side of the street. There's some parking in other areas on the other side of the street, but that whole pedestrian realm, where we want people to be, and accessing local businesses, staying for a while, and just feeling like they're comfortable on street. That is something we've heard as a safety concern as well. So these are all things that we've kind of synthesized through, conversations, group engagement, previous studies. But I think at this point now we kind of want to turn it over to you, the group, and help continue to inform that impression. Thank you.
All right, so we have another series of questions for you all. We want you to rank these in order of priority. So we have quite a few options here, but they should be pretty quick. Got slower driving, less cut through traffic, better lighting, better enforcement of traffic violations such as red light running, more space for pedestrians, converting the street to two-way, and activated and vibrant public spaces. All these options will be moving around as people are responding. Question around, what does cut through traffic mean? Where traffic that's basically not, people aren't going to Welton or Downing, kind of nearby is that destination. They're just moving through, more or less. But there's another, minimal clutter at intersections will maintain pedestrian safety. So it looks like activated and vibrant public spaces is still at the top, converting the street to two-way, slower driving, more space for pedestrians. Those are the top four. All right, moving on to the next one. Again, kind of utilizing the sliding scale here. So strongly disagree on the left, strongly agree on the right. Let us know kind of your support for each of these statements. So current parking conditions on Welton meet my needs. The second one is parking is constrained on Welton and should be prioritized over near active business areas. Or lastly, I'm open to some parking spaces on Welton Street being repurposed for safety features. So that last one, kind of taking away some of the parking spaces, again, repurposing them for some sort of safety feature. Could be a variety of things there. responses are coming in. It looks like most people are saying current parking conditions meet on Welton meet your needs at 4.2 average. Also, people seem fairly open to some parking spaces being repurposed for safety features. And at 1.7, so on the lower end, most people are disagreeing with this statement that parking is constrained and should be prioritized near active business areas. Okay. Great. That's great feedback. Thank you all. We have the exact same questions, sliding scale, but this is for Downing, right? So obviously for the corridor, we're looking at Welton and Downing, and we want to know your thoughts on parking on Downing as well. So does it meet your needs? Is it constrained? Are you open to some of the parking being repurposed on Downing? I'm seeing some stuff in the chat about underutilized parking. It's great feedback. Thank you.
I do see a question about kind of a defined point along Welton, and this is going back to Welton, and I apologize for just catching this, but where the vibrancy seems to stop. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is right now, the majority of that public realm, that area where people are walking, where people are potentially dining, all those kinds of things, is really dictated by the land use near there. So the area you're talking about where things seem to drop off are places where there tends to not be a lot of business activity. There's things like surface parking lots, that kind of stuff, that because that adjacent property owner isn't doing much with their property, that also they're not taking care of or adding anything to that public domain.
Great. Thanks, Maggie. All right. Well, looks like most of this voting has stopped. So similar to Welton in that, the voting and the feedback here. So thank you all. All right. Well, on that, we'll keep moving and we'll turn it over to Maggie for public realm and curbside environment.
Awesome. Thank you guys. So thanks for doing that. Sorry, I'm also keeping track of your Q&As, trying to pick out which ones we're going to talk about later. So a little distracted for a second there. But what I really wanted to go through here was just that description of the public realm and some of the things that we've heard people talk about using the space for. Some of the things I want to bring up when we talk about curbside are the fact, I saw this in some of the chats and questions, can we use that parking area for a number of different things? Can we use it, during the daytime for parking and then parts of it for the evening for pickup and drop off of folks using rideshare? Can we have parking time limits in certain areas during certain times of day that then release later on in the evening so that when folks are coming to see live music, go out to dinner, those kinds of things, they have a little bit more flexibility. So those are all things that we're looking at in that curbside lane there. We also did get the question of, if we were to make this a two-way street with a protected bikeway and add a bunch of things to it, would that eliminate parking? And that goes to that trade-off conversation I think we're going to be having over time is, unfortunately, we can't fit everything in this sandwich, right? So at some point in time, we're going to have to decide, are the tomatoes more important than the cucumbers? And so putting some of those things in perspective and looking at our prioritization there. Another thing that we've heard from local businesses is on some sides of the street, we have a little bit of space where maybe we can eke out an outdoor dining area or something like that. But for the majority of this corridor, that sidewalk space is really limited to folks walking, folks pushing strollers, folks using mobility devices. And especially on the light rail side. So we're really constrained over on that light rail side. So really just thinking about what are the things we want to use the public realm for? Are we interested? I loved seeing that parking information come back. That the perception with this group is there seems to be plenty of parking, and that is potentially for the time of day that you're down there too. So talking about how we manage that parking load from different times of day. So want to go into a few Menti questions here and hopefully tease out a little bit more question from folks. And just as a reminder, this is our current. This is current, and I did see some questions too about lane width and some other things, and those are all details that we can that we can talk about in the future as we come up with other concepts. But the story really changes whether or not we're using up a chunk of this area for light rail. And so really what we're coming today to say is help us weigh this decision and help us understand how in the future we can make recommendations from DOTI to RTD about work that they're doing along the corridor.
All right, thanks, Maggie. So diving back in, if you all would rank these in order of priority, and if you have any other thoughts, priorities, please put them in chat as you all have been. But on this, wider sidewalks, trees and landscaping improvements, public art and cultural markers, lighting, outdoor dining, and drainage improvements. Trees and landscaping.
That seems to be a really
Top.
popular one. Yeah, I know. And as we all go into this drought cycle, and I was watering my street tree earlier today, it's a tough one, but it's so important to just how nice a place feels to exist as a human.
Yeah, and the next three, the outdoor dining, wider sidewalks, and public art and cultural markers seem to be flip-flopping between 2, 3, and 4. So
Yeah. And we put the unsexy thing in there, which is drainage improvements. We always want to ask that question and see what people's concerns may be around that. We all know this. We're a city that's a feast or famine with water. And every once in a while we do have some drainage issues. We have done a ton of work under Welton Street, as you guys know, over the years, to help tie it into some discharge over at the South Platte River, and eliminate some of those flooding issues we've had in the past, or mitigate some of those flooding issues we've had in the past for those major issues.
all right. We can go to the next question, Chelsea. It seems like the responses have slowed down, but thank you for the feedback. So this one, again, sliding scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. The first one, Welton Street should create more space for people, trees, outdoor dining, and gathering, even if it reduces space for parking or traffic. Would you agree or disagree? Feel neutral on that one. The second, Welton Street should keep convenient curbside access to support businesses. And curbside access, we're talking about parking, loading, pickup, and drop off, those types of things that happen right at the curb. And the last one, space for trees and landscape should be prioritized over outdoor dining. We've heard a lot, the last question about, trees and landscaping, but also, what happens kind of above the curb and that pedestrian space. And love to hear if trees and landscape are more important than outdoor dining? We did hear they were both important in the last question. So people strongly agree that Welton should create more space for people, even if it reduces space for parking or traffic. Curbside access, slightly more disagreement than agreement around that. Space for trees and landscape should be prioritized over outdoor dining. Generally, people agree with that. Great. Thanks, everyone. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, this is the last section of cultural identity and economic vitality, the last kind of priority section we'll go through. And then we'll, after this, we'll move into Q&A because I know a lot has been coming through. Christian.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Christian Stewart. I am the community connector for Northeast Denver with Dottie in our Office of Community and Business Engagement. I write something down. I wanted to just center our conversation around when we talk about economic vitality and cultural identity. So Welton Street, the spine of Denver's five-point neighborhood, stands as a living testament to both the heights of Black entrepreneurial excellence and the fragility of historic and cultural identity. As the neighborhood grows, we know that there's a cautionary tale of success and displacement. Historically dubbed the Harlem of the West, Welton Street was a self-sustaining city within a city where Black residents, limited by restrictive economics elsewhere, built a thriving landscape of jazz clubs, professional offices, and storefronts. However, the very forces that are now revitalizing the corridor skyrockets property values and rapid gentrification, serving as a warning that there's a cost to progress. While new investments bring needed infrastructure, they also have led to the displacement of the legacy residents and small businesses who preserved the neighborhood's character during decades of neglect in some places, in some fashions. There's also a constant thought and or risk that the neighborhood's cultural identity will be reduced to a mere brand for new residents rather than a lived reality for the community that built it. The blueprint of economic vitality. Welton Street is currently undergoing a strategic push for sustainable growth. Modern initiatives aim to balance heritage with economic momentum. Cultural preservations as an anchor, like the landmark Smithsonian Hotel, are being redeveloped to serve as destinations that celebrate the area's jazz roots while attracting new foot traffic. The story of Welton Street serves as a reminder that economic vitality is hollow if it does not include the people who laid the foundation for its successes.
Excellent.
Thanks, Christian. All right. Just a few more questions for you all related to this topic. Again, we want to hear kind of the level of support for each of these statements. First one, Welton should focus on celebrating history, culture, and legacy businesses, even if that limits some new development. Second, Welton should prioritize attracting more visitors and new businesses. And the last one, Welton should focus on supporting existing businesses and encourage neighborhood serving businesses. One of those things we've heard like hardware stores and, just some really neighborhood serving businesses. And so that's what we're getting at there. So a lot of support for that. Support for attracting more visitors and new businesses. And the top one, just slightly kind of more in the agreement side around celebrating history, culture, and legacy businesses, even if that limits some new development. So we'll give it a second as the last few responses are probably coming through. And just a reminder, now's the time if you, since we're wrapping up just the mentee polling here, I think we've got two more. If you have questions that you want us to try to address at the end or even after the meeting, if we can't get to them, please put them in Q&A. We have lots of great questions in there. And we will work as hard as we can to answer as many as we can in this meeting. All right, it seems like the responses have slowed down. So, all right, thank you all for that. I think I hadn't changed since I reported out. All right, so the next question is, what potential impacts or risks associated with changes on Welton Street concern you the most? And for this one, you should be able to select two options. So construction impacts on businesses, loss of local or culturally significant businesses, increase in rents or cost of living, new businesses that don't serve current residents, or the last one is loss of neighborhood character or cultural identity. And I know you might want to pick more than two, but just pick your top two for this one. So what I'm seeing is the loss of local or culturally significant businesses and loss of neighborhood character or cultural identity, the top right now. Construction impacts is a fairly close third. All right. Thank you all. Yeah, for the sake of time, let's move to the last one. It looks like most people responded that have been responding. So this question, what's most important during construction? So this is a ranking question. Support for businesses. So this is, again, during construction, we just, want to understand what's most important. Support for businesses, keeping businesses visible and accessible during construction, finishing construction as quickly as possible, minimizing noise, dust, and daily disruption, clear communication lines and timelines. And I lost the last one because everything is moving, but you all should see it on your screen. Sorry about that. Oh, maybe it's maintaining safe access for walking, biking, and transit. Safety, Claire, thank you. I see your comment about safety is your top priority during construction. So at the top is keeping businesses visible and accessible during construction, maintaining safe access for walking, biking, and transit, and then support for businesses, kind of top three. We'll wait for the last handful of responses to really come through here. All right. I think we can close this one out. Thank you all. Thanks for the feedback and answering all of our questions that we had for you. Now it's your turn to ask us. Maggie, I'll turn it over to you, I think, right?
Yeah, awesome, guys. Thank you. I was able to take some notes here and get to some of our questions. So, the first one I think I'm going to direct towards David and Meredith. But what are we doing to engage transit-dependent residents currently riding the L line in this process?
Maggie, thank you for the question, and whoever submitted that, thank you for the question. Tonight was the first opportunity to sort of open ourselves and engage with you all. We expect as Dottie to have additional consultant resources on board in the summer to be able to continue to expand the outreach more directly. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. Let's see here. How does our plan to do this study align with RTD's rail replacement plans for the future? David, do you want to take that, or Chris, would you like to take that?
I'm happy to give a start, and
Yeah.
Chris, you can help out if I go off the
Okay.
rails, pun intended.
Mhm.
Um, so I think RTD's 2014 study identified some key issues from an engineering perspective of implementing the Downing extension. RTD has in the near term has the Downing or the Welton line is some of the oldest track in the network. And we know that any big improvements or changes to the corridor will take 5 to 10 years, as I said in my opening slide. So we need um, the light rail to continue operating in the meanwhile. Information that RTD is collecting right now and all of our input will help us make the decision or make an opinion, a clear opinion to RTD known by this fall so that RTD can adjust its investment appropriately. RTD also is considering um, lower floor vehicles as the trains themselves age out. The fleet may be switched over to lower floor vehicles with fewer steps to get up to where you would sit. And that's also in the 10 to 15 year horizon out there. So all those things are telling us we need to work together very carefully this summer and fall to provide RTD some input that will help them prioritize their funding.
Yeah, thanks, David. I have nothing to add.
Awesome. Next question is, will this study analyze a full double tracking of the L line, either through a second track on the Welton corridor or a parallel street? Anyone want to jump on that one? It's a big one.
Maggie, I'll seeing some of the questions come through the corridor, there's been a lot of suggestions for what we should analyze, and I think what I'll do is say that we need to get community agreement on what are the most important options to analyze. We won't be able to analyze 500 alternatives, so we'll need to focus on those ones that make the most sense based on community input. So we'll work with you all to kind of narrow that through a process and make sure we're evaluating the ones that seem to hit the most community desires most squarely.
Excellent. We have a question about the timeline. So, in the event that we move forward with what Fast Track says to connect the L line up to Downing, does anyone have an estimate on about how much time that would take and what that priority would be in Fast Tracks? Chris, do you want to jump in on that one for us?
Yeah, so right now, we, as I mentioned earlier, the most recent report we did, the Central Rail extension, we were not able to identify an alternative without operational issues. So we would have to do some further study to determine exactly what the extension would in fact look like. As far as funding, there's currently RTD has about $195 million in what we're calling the Fast Tracks internal savings account. The estimated cost from our most recent estimate is approximately 210 million to complete the corridor. So short answer, we don't have a definitive plan.
Okay. Thanks for answering that. Let's see here. What have we got next? And here's one that I actually might want to jump in a little bit on is adjacent day use parking lots such as Denver Health and churches could be a source of off-hour parking? And the answer to that is yes, they could be a source. There are a number of legal issues associated with that, and bringing folks to the table to have those conversations is a possibility. And I do think that is something that I think with work through the council office and the bid, we could be in touch with some of those business owners to find out if those parking lots, such as that great big Denver Health lot that closes at 5 p.m., or some of those other lots in the area could be utilized for evening parking and other options. The next one, what would the implications be of a conversion to two-way traffic? What would we potentially lose on Welton Street or gain on Welton Street by having two-way traffic? Would anyone want to jump in on that one? I saw Justin come to life.
Yeah. So two-way traffic, really just talked about it in the near-term context of like what it could do for safety. But I don't want to predispose any future understanding of existing conditions or analysis that are going to come by saying, two-way traffic. I think one of the comments talked about the lane widths in that two-lane section, 10 to 11 feet. So arguably, the two-lane will allow movement from both directions, right? Like that's one of the obvious benefits of it is like people can use the corridor in ways it's not currently being used. And that's the inherent challenge with all of our one ways sometimes, which is they're really good at moving cars through and out, right? People are usually headed somewhere else, and the one ways tend to move quicker. They're built for cars to move. So a two-way conversion would, put you at eye to eye level with oncoming traffic. It would likely have, I believe, through our guidelines, smaller lane widths, slower overall movement, right? We're not talking about a huge corridor. We are talking about a corridor that's got a lot of concentration of destinations, quite honestly, that the roadway doesn't always treat those destinations the way a two-way street could, which is to bring more destination traffic on Welton versus more through traffic. And I think that's the crucial part of why a two-way needs to be looked at and should be looked at as part of the study.
Great. Thank you, Justin. I really appreciate that. This one just came in. The holiday extension for the L line was great. Why was it discontinued, and how can we get that back?
It was meant to be a temporary, well, as it was called, the holiday train. It was meant to be a temporary service. We are looking at the possibility of whether or not we can, in fact, plug in, or shall I say, replug in the L line with the rest of the system, potentially maybe the H line. I don't have much information on that right now. It's just something that is under consideration. So my best answer on that is kind of stay tuned.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. This may be another one for our RTD team, but how much would connecting the A line to other light rail lines, such as pre-2018, improve ridership and provide connectivity that a bus could not?
I don't have a good answer there. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
We'd have to.
No worries.
We can get an answer, but I don't know what it is. So.
Excellent. Yeah, we have a lot of questions for data in here, and
yeah,
we do have a lot of folks who are interested in that. So we'll work on getting that back to those subject matter experts and other things. I do see a lot of questions about landscaping, trees in the right of way, those kinds of things. I spoke a little bit earlier about how, we live in a really difficult place to grow trees and a really difficult place to do landscaping. And every season, global warming seems to be giving us another knockdown at the knees on that. But we have learned some really important lessons. I saw a lot of reference to Colfax BRT in that construction process of how we can provide valuable and sustainable spaces for trees. And it does take a decent amount of space. So that is something that as we're considering that width, for anyone who's growing trees in their tree lawn, a 3-foot tree lawn, it's nearly impossible to grow a tree. And our folks over at Denver Forestry would not allow us to put trees into a place like that. But would we have the ability to have some 8-foot tree lawns or other tree well options? Trees would become more of a possibility. So that's definitely one of those things to consider when we talk trade-offs as we're doing that. And I do see the question about will native plants be considered in landscaping? And the answer to that is certainly yes. When Denver does projects in the city, we work really closely with the Denver Parks Department and our Forestry Department. We have a wonderful team over there that works on recommending native, low water, grasses and plantings that are going to help those areas be low water and be more sustainable. You may have seen there is a project ongoing right now, right in front of the city and county building, where we're going to be removing a lot of those higher water plants, a lot of turf, those kinds of things that are really unsustainable in our current climate, in our future climate, to do that. So know that any project that Denver's going to be putting in is certainly going to be native and or low water plantings. All right. Does anyone else on the team have any questions that they are excited to ask or that they feel like they would have a great answer to? We can look in the chat here. We can also look in our spreadsheet.
Hey, Maggie, this is Councilman Watson. I wanted to
Yeah.
jump in on there's a question I asked earlier about parking and having dialogues with folks that are the adjacent property owners like Denver Health. I just wanted to share those discussions are ongoing and should have some information to community about agreements on providing support for folks coming down to the Walter Street corridor and parking in places that they currently can't right now.
Excellent. Excellent. That's really good to hear. That's really great to hear.
And Darius, I think you had a question on NADB buildings. Do you want to jump in and speak to that?
Yeah, I'll quickly jump in. Someone in the chat basically asked if there was anything being done to address some of those neglect and derelict buildings along the Welton corridor. Just wanted to let them know that our office has made an effort working with CPD to increase the number of buildings that were identified as neglect and derelict buildings within the city. Technically now there's 8 on there, and I believe all 8 of those buildings have been in communications with CPD to either sell their property or they will be doing some rehabilitation on those properties.
Great. And just to add a little bit to that, as a former council aide myself, I've dealt with a lot of this particular issue. But for anyone who doesn't know, we do have a registry, and that's a capital V and a capital D, vacant and derelict, that goes on a specific list. And those property owners are offered a lot of assistance, a lot of resources to help get those properties into compliance. But if that doesn't work out, folks are able, the city is able over time, with lots and lots of work from our city attorney and other folks, to encourage the sale of those properties and get other folks in there. Obviously, we're walking a really fine line between, people's rights to do what they want to do with their property and what is appropriate in our urban areas for the health and safety and well-being of our communities. So it is a long and cumbersome process. I live over near 37th and York, where you guys might remember the old, I used to call them the haciendas that were in there. Those were eventually taken through vacant and derelict, and those kinds of things, and turned into Clara Brown Commons. So we definitely have some options there, but they do take some time.
Yeah, thanks for adding that context, Maggie. And I don't want to get too far off track from the current discussion that we're having. I'll put my email in the chat if anyone wants to speak about that particular subject, then feel free to reach out.
Exactly, exactly. I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, in the transportation world, we talk about land use a lot just because, as I tell folks, you can have all the great car lanes, transit facilities, bike lanes, sidewalks in the world, but if there aren't places that we can get to and that are fulfilling our needs, how can we then what's the point of having all those things, right? If there aren't places to go that we're getting our goods and services and daycare and all those kinds of things taken care of. So I do see a question here. What prevents buses from being run on Welton in an effort to increase frequency and flexibility of the corridor even before any kind of light rail decision is made? This seems like a cheap, easy, valuable way to gather data on demand and ridership patterns. Does anyone want to jump in on that one? David, I see you come to life.
Sure, I'll start, and Chris or May can help as well. The buses could run in the street to have serviceable bus stops. Additional bus stop signs would have to be put up so people know where on the curb or at the platform the bus would stop. And we just have to do an ADA evaluation to make sure that if we picked curb stops or yeah, curb stops that they were accessible.
Great.
So conceptually easy, but not without community input. Our RTD uses a community input process to make changes like that, even in short-term changes.
Good to know. Good to know there. Anyone want to add anything to that? And then I think this is another, devil's in the detail question, but I do think a lot of inquiring minds want to know, can Welton Street be converted to a two-way traffic configuration with the existing light rail configuration, or does one completely preclude the other? Would anyone like to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I was going to say that is some of what needs to be looked at this summer. I think there is definitely complexity. I'm not a traffic engineer, but for instance, you have Welton itself, then you have Downing, which has been two-wayed, right, which is part of that. And so I think all of this analysis has to look at the feasibility of the existing two-way condition, a potential two-way condition on Welton, and then I think a lot of the challenges would come from just all of the potential turning movements and can everything be integrated into the overall traffic network that way? Don't have an answer to the question, but that's one of the things that needs to be looked at and studied.
Excellent, excellent. So, as we're getting close to time here to be respectful of everyone, I do see some questions about, what are we going to do with the data coming out of this conversation, with the anecdotal things coming out of this conversation. So, I think that I will just start on my end with the commitment that we will be publishing a document with answers to all of the questions that have come in through our Q&A. Some of those are not necessarily Welton related, but we'll try to get answers to those as well as they pertain to other projects in the city or other light rail stations and areas that we aren't talking about here. But know that that is going to happen. And then let me just turn the floor back over to Meredith. Meredith, would you jump in and kind of let us know what next steps are and where we're headed from here?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Maggie. Thanks for going through all those questions. Lots more to report out after this. But most of you all have probably been on the project website, webpage, and maybe, I don't know, Maggie, if you would be able to maybe dump that in chat in case people
Do that.
haven't
Yep.
been there, that'd be great. There's an FAQ, there's lots of information on the webpage on there. There will also be a link tomorrow for a survey that'll be open. Some similar questions to tonight, but please take the survey, share it with your friends, your family, everybody. We'd love to get as many responses as possible. It'll be open for several weeks until May 12th. We have a community advisory committee group meeting that's been working with us through this process. So we're going to meet with them, and then we will be sharing more information about kind of the next steps, the next public meeting, other engagement opportunities. As David said, there's a more consultant team coming on board, and we will be, diving into even more work. So there will be much more coming this summer and through the fall. But coming out of this, we will be establishing kind of that corridor position statement and sharing that with RTD, and that's really based on the feedback that we heard tonight, and then we'll be hearing through the survey. So, and then also the advisory group that has been meeting with us. So, please take the survey. These things are really, really important, and visit that website for updates. And there's contact information. I believe Phoebe's contact is on there, so reach out to her with questions. And thank you all so much for joining tonight. Loved seeing so many people on and responsive, and so many questions coming our way.
I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
just ask, I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask one more favor of everyone. I know I put it in the chat, but if anyone has any information about how they learned about this meeting, great ways that we could publish information about upcoming meetings to reach folks in the community that you think are important to engage. That's often one of our big struggles. So help us get some more information about how to engage folks. Are there organizations? Are there apartment buildings? Are there other folks that you'd like us to reach out to, HOAs, to get folks involved? Please let us know. You can also send that out to the project team. And then I wanted to just offer Councilman Watson the last word before we head out, if there's anything he'd like to add, and finish us off here.
Thank you so much, Meredith and team. Thank you so much, Maggie, Dottie, and the folks from RTD. Thank you very much. Thank you most of all for the over 100 folks who showed up tonight and chose to be here and participate outside of doing something else. This is one of our initial discussions. There will be plenty of data, and that's the great thing with having a mobility study. And the consultants, they're going to be walking through this and providing that throughout. Your voice is necessary, needed, and welcomed. Please continue providing feedback. We're going to consolidate all of the information you just provided it back to you in a level of reporting, and then we will continue through this process through the third, fourth quarter with the expectation to have some level of clarity to provide to RTD on next steps. So once again, thanks to everyone. Thanks to Meredith for her facilitation, David for answering most of the questions that we asked here, and everyone have a great evening. I'll turn it back over to Maggie, Meredith, and David.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Again, thank you for your time. Look for our next steps soon, as we're going to be having a CAG meeting coming up here to discuss what we heard in this meeting and distill some of that down. Also look at a lot of those questions and a lot of that data that we're going to be asking for from our technical consultant team who are onboarding right now. So look for more data, more info. We're really working to get a good product out of this study here. And then just as a reminder, I'm kind of here helping out tonight, but Phoebe Fuchs is our project manager, and we'll make sure to share Phoebe's information with the group in case anyone has questions and needs to reach out to her. And I appreciate everyone's time. So unless anyone else has anything else from the team, I think we are ready to get back to life, and I'm sure everyone's got hungry kids and hungry stomachs of their own to get to.
Thank
you
you
all.
Thanks,
all so
everyone.